Yeah, so gone a little bit off topic there, Jamie, but that's
That's okay. It was interesting.
yeah, because you've worked in the system as well too, haven't you? What's it like for you being a worker in your industry and having lived experience yourself? Are you allowed to share that or have a voice around that, or what's that like for you? And how does that impact? How does the parental alienation impact your work?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I work in the disability sector, and I think personally, people respond. The people I work with, people with disabilities that I work with, respond enormously well to just being open and kind and empathic, but having a structure around what we're going to be doing. We have boundaries. I have boundaries, and I implement them when I feel it's necessary. So I think, yeah, the empathy is just a huge thing with people with disabilities. So trying to work in that sector has been great for me because I think it's almost like I've found my tribe. It's almost like I'm safe with people with disabilities because oftentimes they're straightforward, they're quite open, they're quite welcoming, they're great group of the community to spend time with, and being paid for it is just a huge bonus. I think I'd absolutely volunteer in that sector if I was, had the capacity to, if I didn't need to work, or if I couldn't work in something else that's more say white collar or business related. So I just love I love the acceptance. But then again, you get some people who give other people with disabilities a hard time because they might be might say have more physically able than someone else. I've seen some heartless behaviour and some heartless talk from within groups, and I call them on it every time I see it. So would you like to be spoken to like that? Well, no. Well, why is it okay that you do it? And I just keep reinforcing that, and I model that behaviour: unconditional positive regard, engaging with people. How are you? And that's how I operate. And so that's what I bring, and that's what works for me, and that seems to be what the people I work with, the clients I work with, or the participants I work with, what they respond to.
I love how you show up. I mean, this is how you show up. So, we go through all this tragic stuff, and some people repeat the same that they were, but then some of us come through and we break through. So we've been broken down, but we've broken through, and we do not repeat that. And you show up in a way that you want to be treated. So amazing thing that you just shared.
Thank you. I think prior to me getting into this sector, I spent years working in all sorts of different contexts. I guess growing up the way I grew up, it built resilience. It was hard fought and won, I guess, but I was always the new kid, and I was always being picked on, always being bullied because I'd had I guess my mother was fearful that I would end up being the same as my father, because he allegedly had a foul temper and allegedly beat people up. And anytime she saw any of that masculinity in me, she was quite fearful of that. So that was hammered out of me at a young age, physically and verbally. And so I never stuck up for myself. But I was always always a factor of any interaction with other people was I was desperate to be liked by them. I was like a people pleaser, and I was, and then I despised myself for it. I was like, that's just, it's so weak, it's so disempowered. I just like, who are you? And I guess that fed into my sense of self-loathing. But now it's,
I think
I'm
it's,
accepted.
I think that's what makes you strong. I think that's
Yeah.
really your strength.
Mm. And I guess people who hadn't grown up with that sort of level of trauma and that sort of upbringing, I've noticed it in my kids because they've they've had a very sort of vanilla, wholesome upbringing with there's no addiction in the home. There's the financial stresses aren't really there because we've worked very hard and very smart. And they haven't moved around. They've lived in the one house their whole life. And so what I'm noticing with them in their adolescence is they kind of lack a bit of resilience, but that's not their fault. But I guess they'll get through that. It's just something I noticed. So yeah.
Wow.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Total flip of the other coin. But I wanted to ask you a question. You work with people with disabilities, and I've worked with people with disabilities for 34 years myself, and people with mental health stuff, and for me, they do feel like my tribe as well. So that's really interesting that we have that common thread. Because, and the other thing that I always feel, and I wanted to know if you did too, is I like to empower them and teach them how to have their own voices and to advocate for them and to get them to stand up for their rights and teach them how to do that. This is something that I'm pretty good at, so I'm using that in my work. And then once I've taught them how to do that, then move back so that they have a voice. Do you do that by any chance?
Every single day. Every day. Even when people using public transport, I have a chat to them about what was going on and making sure they stay safe and not being, ripped off by somebody who just might all the time. Maybe one person I work with, there's somebody who sees them a bit as they're getting on the train, they're asking them for money or they're asking them for smokes or whatever the case may be. I said, do they ever give you anything? Well, no. Why not? So how is that reasonable? How is that fair? And I say to them, if you turn the situation around, if you just swap places in a conversation, can you ever see that happening? Well, no. Okay, well, maybe think about why you're doing it or what it's costing you, because cigarettes are about $1 per cigarette in Australia. It's about 60 or 70 cents US per cigarette in here. So for somebody who's on a disability support pension, that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And if they've got a nicotine habit, to be sharing with almost a stranger or someone who's just their friend because they can get something from them. So I'm always advocating for the people that I work with and having a chat to them about finances or about the level of sugar, because a lot of people I work with love Coke, love sugar, and spend a lot of money on soft drinks. And I say, well, is this really doing you any favors? Because I did a health degree a little while back and I know a little bit about it. And we sort of have a chat about what their diet's like and what type of food they're eating, because some of them are carrying a few extra pounds, quite a few extra pounds, and they're just uninformed, I guess. So I just see it as a gentle way of just having a chat, because we're doing the job that we're doing, or we're driving along to go to wherever we happen to be going to. We have a general discussion, not targeting anybody so they feel like they're being targeted and people aren't looking at them and judging them, but just an open conversation about food in general, what types of food work well, what types of food really don't do us any favors, and I just, all the time. So
do you think that that's something to do with your parental alienation and not having a voice?
Oh, I imagine there'd be a component in that, but I think it'd take people that are better trained than me to tease that apart to work out.
So where did this come from? Who gave you this example, or set this, was a role model that would teach you this after growing up in the situation that you were alienated from both parents? So who was your role model? Or was there one?
I'm trying to think. I don't think I had one.
I mean, you must have
just
had a teacher, or, if you go to
not really, because I moved around so much. I
you.
didn't. I mean, the longest I went to any given high school was 2 years, and that was with completely separate teachers each time.
Something that you
Maybe the scouting movement. I had some scout leaders and some venturer leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Scouts here is from 10 to 14, and venturers is from 14 to 18, and then beyond that, maybe I had some men who I actually respected. I was in a local junior fire brigade when I was growing up, and there were some men in there who I think might have influenced where I was headed and what I was doing, and maybe gave me a bit of a framework, but I can't think of any specifics.
I didn't have like a long-term specific person either, but I think I had enough that I was like a sponge, and I just absorbed as much as they gave me in that good influence. And I think that's what helped me become, a better parent, to my children, so that I could break that cycle as well. So maybe, if those of us that go through this, maybe we do have influences that are outside of that help us make this change and this transition.
Yeah, I agree.
I've had a nun for 25 years.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, a person.
I think too, the way I brought my kids up was, there was this overarching philosophy of, what's this child learning in their interaction with me? Are they learning that? And I was fair, and I've never hit them. No physical abuse at all whatsoever. I just used to count them. Okay, you're on 1 for doing that to your little sister or your little brother or whatever, and on 3 you're going into your room in timeout, or on 3 you don't have any television this afternoon. So they'd buy into that. 1, 2, 3 magic. Loved it, lived it and breathed it. It was a really good system. But also, I guess I brought them up with, how would I like to have been treated? What would have really worked its ass off for me, and how would I have responded, and what would have helped me sort of blossom as a person, rather than to have been beaten down as a growing person. So I think that that sort of informed it as well.
So I know you know a little bit about intergenerational trauma. So I just wanted to sort of ask you, what are your views around stopping intergenerational trauma, so that some other people who are listening to this might go, oh, okay, so this is way bigger than just me and my divorcing parents, and how is this going to impact on my children and my grandchildren? Like, what are you doing to kind of change the course of that? Because I know that you are, and I know that some people don't understand that you can do that, and I know that some people are absolutely choosing not to change that, but I know you're not one of those people. I know you're walking that journey. So could you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, I'd have to have more time to think about that, I think.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Yep, that's all right. Because I'm just hearing the flip, sort of from the way that you grew up to the way that you're working with your kids now. And to me, this is what I try to get everyone who comes in to see me, who's in this intergenerational trauma pattern, to identify the trauma pattern, to understand that they can actually change their behavior, so it's not breeding down into the next generations who are coming through. So let's look at the alcoholism that was coming through, or the drug addiction, or the sex addiction, or the gambling, or where's that coming from? How is that playing out in my life now? How can I work with that in therapy, so that I'm not just rote speaking some of the things that were put into me straight into my children, so they learn that violent communication language and then keep passing it down, or they stay with the addiction. I'm trying to be like a much better mentor, role model, changing my parenting style. And I know that with my kids, some of the PA stuff came through because I was 20 when I had my son. So, and I didn't know any different. And I know that some of that splitting stuff was affecting me then. But then once I understood it, I managed to be able to change that when I had my daughter 7 years after that. So there was a big shift there for me. And I will say to my son now, like, I didn't know any different. I understand that some of the things that I might have done were linked to my teachings, and I want to change that, and I'm working on changing that, and I'm really sorry, and I will talk to you about that anytime. I will step into that space and discuss what that was like for you and hear you empathically, what was going on for me and the enmeshment with my alienating parent and how I was caught up in that and trying to move out of that space, and how it did affect our relationship and how to move on past that. So that's a bit of what I'm sort of speaking to here. It's a bit long and drawn out. Yeah.
I guess, as you mentioned before, it's not just about you, and it's not just about as a parent or as a potentially alienating parent. It's not about what you need to get out of it, whether you're feeling bitter or resentful towards your ex-partner. It's about looking at it empathically, or look from the perspective of the children and what it's doing to them. And I guess for me, insight, I've said this a million times to the people who know me, insight's gold. But to gain insight, in my experience, it's important to step back from the situation and having the ability to be objective about it and going, okay, well, let's look at the ingredients here and who's being affected and how is this going to play out. And hopefully this interview is informing some people who are potentially going down that path, or have already gone down that path of alienating their ex-spouse. The impact is profound. The impact is very complicated to try and reverse if we can, and it affects people for the rest of their lives. And
do you think it ever solves or goes away, or is there ever any kind of, like, I know there's no eraser or magic anything, but does it ever go away without really working on it, or because you reached a certain age? Or do you feel like children that turn 18 can heal from the trauma that they endured now that they're an adult?
With support, absolutely, but just organically, I think the chances of it happening are way lower than actually being focused and actually having an inquiring mind to sort of like work out, why am I different? Why do I see the world differently to other people? Why do I feel this way about myself when it's obvious to me that other people don't have the same sort of outlook, because they're valuing themselves to go to college, to educate themselves, to improve their make a home or make a living and support their families and be present in their communities, where I was always, I'm not so much now, but I was always, the opposite of that. So I think, just try and see it from a different point of view than what your parents gave you, and try and question the way you were brought up, perhaps as a parental, as an adult survivor of parental alienation. Just question the status quo, rock the boat a bit, because we were never taught to have a voice. It was always a very cult-based kind of, we were moons orbiting planet mother, and we never had any sort of any
So
voice.
it takes a realization. They have to realize what they have gone through, understand it, and then acknowledge it. And sometimes that doesn't happen until they hear stories like this.
Yeah, and I know people who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s who are the least insightful people I've ever met, because they're just, and it's not an age-based thing, it's not a maturity thing. I think it's a mindset. I think it's a willingness to investigate, and it's an openness to seeking truth and to looking to make change, and just knowing in your heart and in your very soul that there's something that's just not right for the way that you see the world and the way that you were brought up. And even then I guess it was louder for me, that voice was louder for me than the voice of my mother, who was kept wanting me to realign with her if I started to wander, if I started to have a voice, if I started to stray from her path, you know. So yeah, I think just have an open mind and look at the impact of what of your interactions on the other people in the relationship, children, and the potential for great harm over a long period of time. And there's something you can do about it.
Decades later, sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So I think the 18 thing, Dawn, is what's going on in the courts. I think if I could just take you back there for a sec, because you're hearing some judges saying things around when the child hits 18 and stuff. Could you share a little bit about that with us so that we can give you what we think about that?
So it could be judges, it could be lawyers, it could be somebody that just happens to testify that, you know, maybe represents a specific organization or a bar. But some of the things that are said, and I'll give the example of the last one that I heard, and I don't know what their position was, but what their comment was is that, you know, in this scenario, the child, you know, might have to go visit, you know, mom or dad, one of their parents, but it's an hour car drive. So we can't really burden the children with an hour car drive because it's just too hard on them. So that's one thing. But another thing that they're telling parents is that, you know, wait until they're 18. You know, when they're 18, you know, they'll come and look for you. They'll find you then, and then you can have a relationship. Or, you know, wait until, you know, they get a little older, or, you know, you can reach out to them later. Just, you know, keep buying them birthday presents or Christmas cards or whatever, send that to them. And then now that, you know, there's times where as children, we've heard, and I've heard it myself, that once you're an adult, you can make up your own mind. So there's this like limbo and this magic number 18 when they say, when they're 18, you know, they'll know what to do. They'll come and find you. But that's not reality. That is a myth. That's my opinion, that it's a myth, that, you know, what we're saying is not helping the child in any way. It's only helping the system. So we hear a lot.
What's 18? 18 is just an arbitrary number. I mean, you know, people develop at different rates, and
they
mentally,
age,
prefrontal cortex, you know, it's just, oh, wow.
It's
a
very
cookie cutter, one size fits all kind of number. And
yeah. Well, they're no longer a minor. Now they're a legal age. They can actually make their own decisions without a mom or a dad telling them what to do. So they just think, well, you know, your kid's 5, you know, come back in 13 years and, you know, you can pick up where you left off.
What do you think about that, James?
I just think that's a really simplistic way of looking at a situation, and it's almost, instead of, I think it might, there's a risk that it might, that people might be told that and think that, oh, okay, 18, that's cool. I just need to back away, and I think I won't be playing a part in this anymore. Whereas if they were encouraged to re-engage or encouraged to, this is the alienate from an alienated parent's perspective, to maybe to maintain that engagement and keep making the effort to contact their kids, to talk to them, to send birthday cards, to send Christmas cards, and make that effort.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would have a greater impact on an alienated child than simply it'll all be beer and Skittles when they're 18. I don't know how that would work. I don't know how it does work, if it does. I'm not sure it does.
I don't think. What would you say about a 12-year-old that gets to decide, okay, I no longer want to go see mom, I no longer want to go see dad? Do you think that it's okay for a child to make that choice? Or do you have an opinion on that?
I can't imagine. I'm just trying to picture a scenario where that might benefit them, and whose voice that is, whether it's the 12-year-old child's voice or it's the alienating parent's voice and they've been indoctrinated. I can't imagine it's going to be, as long as the parent that's being alienated is a safe person for that child to be around and a loving person. I can't imagine where a 12-year-old from our background might have, where that opinion might be healthy for either them as a growing human or as their or for their alienated parent.
Yeah, and so, you know, some people here say, because that happens a lot here, when a child turns 12, you know, oftentimes they can speak to the judge and they can tell the judge, no, I don't want to see my mom anymore, or no, I don't want to see my dad anymore. And then that's granted because they're old enough to make this decision all of a sudden. But are they old enough, really? Are they old enough to decide, okay, well, I no longer want to go to school, so do I get to get out of that as well? Or no, officer, I don't like that law and I wanted to eat that candy bar, so I took it, and that's just the way it is. Is that how we want to, you know, when we give children that empowerment at the age of 12, are they capable of handling it?
I'm not sure they're capable of handling it at 18.
Yeah.
Let alone 12, God.
But I'm just wondering, for kids of really severe PA, like I use myself for example, if I was asked that question in court, I would be very, very worried about saying yes to seeing that other parent, that we're the targeted parent, because when we go home, if we said yes about wanting to see that targeted parent, the alienated parent would then target us. It's then now not a safe place to be at home, and those behaviours are very, very covert, and they're not easily noticed. And if we know of heaps of instances where the children have lied in court because, one, they might have been preempted, educated to do that. Two, they could have had threats around them about not still siding with the alienating parent, and what that could potentially look like if you don't side with me. Or we can get told things like, if you think about it, by 12 we were being told that that person was a monster and was going to kidnap and kill us and take us for, I don't know, 10 years. So why would a child in that situation, and that could be a safe, loving, healthy parent, why would we go, yeah, let's go hang out with them? There's so many other factors to this. It's not that, I don't think that what's at play here, they have any idea what's at play here. Because
like the other thing that when you said why, so why would anybody in one of these leadership roles, the judge or, you know, whoever is making these decisions, put that burden on the child.
They shouldn't be doing that, because it's just for a severely alienated child to go back to the alienated parent. If that alienated parent thinks for 1 second that we've sided with the targeted parent, or are giving any energy or love or missing them or grieving about them, God help you. God help the child. We have to maintain a persona where we're completely attached to the alienating parent. We're not allowed to speak up. We're not. This is the psychological splitting. And this is the difference between mild, moderate, and severe. So if you are a child of that environment, which I was, you don't have a voice. You do not say, yeah, I'd love to go see my dad. I miss my dad. I want to see my dad. You don't get to do that. You have to show alliance, allegiance to the alienating parent, and God help you if you don't, because then we're looking at psychological abuse, physical abuse, all sorts of stuff coming in. And that parent might, the dysregulation that happens within the narcissistic personality disordered parent, and potentially borderline as well, is so huge that can go on and on, off and on and off and on and off for months and months and months after an event like that. So you don't ever know what mood they're going to be in, when it's going to change. It's so dangerous living in that environment that you are trained to, within an inch of your life, to not speak about the other parent or go near the other parent. It's not safe. It's all these stuff. So when they're putting someone in that situation, if depending on the level of PA that's going on, I think that's a very dangerous thing to be doing, personally. That's from my experience as an adult child of severe PA.
Children, they often don't know what's going on, but they know how to, well, I don't know if they know how to stay out of trouble so much that they know when they shouldn't do something that could cause a lot of pain or bring more trauma. You learn really fast what to avoid. You'll do it once, maybe twice, but then you learn and you're like, okay, can't do that ever again. And you don't. And that's when that breakdown, for me anyway, the breakdown and that closing off. And when I started just detaching, or, not having that established relationship, the trust breaks down, all kinds of things just start falling, and you kind of suffer in silence.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd just like to add here is where we have a biologically based system that's been developed to ensure our own survival. So when, as children, we're threatened or uncomfortable or hungry, our attachment system activates, and then our attention behaviour turns into proximity seeking behaviour. And if the child gravitates to the primary caregiver, they're in a perfect world, they would give us comfort and make us feel safe and secure. But when we're dealing with someone who's personality disordered, a lot of the time that doesn't happen. So we live in insecure attachment. So we're kind of, oh, they're showing us love, no they're not. They're showing us love, no we're not. And then when we have a parent disappear, the abandonment for us is massive. So now we've got a parent that's disappeared. We can feel very, very abandoned. And then we've got someone in the household who's in and out of this fluctuating states. And the symptoms of abandonment are major. They're
grief.
The separation anxiety, we can have panic a lot of the time. We can have fears of being alone. We're very, very vulnerable to feeling abandoned, children of PA, and we can be very, very clingy, or we can cycle through relationships later on. We can sabotage relationships, pushing people away. We could be very, very needy, looking for constant reassurance. So these are all different presentations that we can have as adult children from these abandonment stuff. So when I hear people saying, oh, it's fine, leave the kid until they're 18, that's not okay, because everything that I've just explained with regards to our being biologically based, having these systems, what it does for us, the abandonment stuff gets triggered. This is long-term psychological sort of stuff that we have to deal with for the rest of our lives. And when someone says to us 18, are you kidding? Like, kids need both parents. They should be getting equal time with both parents all the time, as long as they're both safe. And this needs to be what's happening. This 18-year-old stuff is just too weird. So I don't know, but see, I don't know, what would that be like too if we had 50% custody and we went home to a personality disordered alienating parent? What would that have been like for us? So there's a much bigger thing at play here than these simplified answers. And like James said, like, I'm like, WTF? Are you kidding? Like, it's way bigger. And why is this stuff playing out in court too? Like, this is a psychologically based issue. Why is family court dealing with this?
They shouldn't be. We want to remove this from family court, at least this part of it. You know, there's certain things that will be there, but there's a lot of this that needs to be removed. Divorce should not go through court. So we need to remove that from the courtroom. But would either one of you consider this type of treatment towards a child abuse?
Oh, hell yeah, I would.
Absolutely.
No question, he said.
So here we have 3 children that have been raised or have experienced this. We have this lived experience. We all say, yes, it's this emotional trauma, these long-term effects that we have endured. We all 3 agree that this is child abuse.
Absolutely. Yep. And it's very, very difficult for me to work with adult survivors when they come into the room and they have no idea what's happened to them. I have to start from ground zero and work right through all the stages, the realization stage, the grief. I have to teach them all the attachment stuff. I have to teach them all of this huge picture just to unravel and try and get some of those pieces of the puzzle together. Like, it's absolutely major. And you think about it, like, James, what's it like for you with regards to events in your family, like weddings, funerals, baptisms? Like, what's that like? Like, does the PA stuff come up for you?
Well, given my the distance I am from my family, that's all of my family, I don't tend to go to birthdays and the occasional Christmas, maybe, because it's probably a 10-hour drive, and to get to that group of people. And a lot of the time it's just like, I really don't have the energy for it. My father hasn't been around for any of the significant events for my own children or for me. And so that's sort of like, well, that's just the norm. And I feel quite separated from all of my family, actually. I think my only real family is the one that my wife and my kids. So, and the friends that I've made here. Yeah, I think, and that might have been just a hangover from growing up separated, erased, to use Dawn's expression, from one side of the family, my father's side of the family, and kind of the rest of the family as well, because we moved interstate a fair way away from my maternal family when I was young. So I'm sort of just hung onto that, and that's just okay. But I'm also averse to going up there to where my mother is, being around her, because I'm not safe around her. I don't feel safe around her. I know to my core that she's not a safe person to be around, and I'm being protected, my wife and my children too. So guess that's the ongoing legacy of growing up in that environment, and its impact on me. I'm quite self-reliant, quite independent of my family, if you like. There's a couple there that I really care about, but the rest of them, I don't know. I'm not having grown up with them, I don't have a really strong bond with them. So I guess that's part of that too. So I guess that's the end result of all that.
Okay. So do you have any other questions for Jamie, Dawn? Because I'm sort of, yeah, I'm wondering how you're both traveling at this point.
I think this was really good. I think I appreciate, James, everything that you shared and your insight and the experiences that you've had. And I hope that the more we bring this stuff forward and the more, because what I think we're realizing is there isn't one type of alienation. There's many types of alienation, and there isn't a time frame that we feel it and then it's done. It's a lifelong sentence that we're given, and we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that by causing that kind of trauma to that level, to that degree, is really child abuse. It's mentally exhausting, and it affects how we make or how we build relationships, how we deal with conflict. Can we have an argument and not feel like the world's coming to an end? Can we have a disagreement with somebody without feeling like we're enemies? And can we be healthy adults that can parent children in a healthy way? So all these things are what we learn from our childhood, and we're bringing that forward. And we're bringing the baggage that we shouldn't have baggage as children.
No.
So bringing baggage from our childhood into a relationship, that is a problem. Children should not have luggage.
No. So, James, do you have anything that you'd like to say to anyone who might be watching who may have hit the realization stage during this interview, or maybe past it and looking for treatment, or just anything that you'd like to share before we go?
Sorry, this is to other adult survivors. It's not your fault. This is the situation you grew up in, and you didn't have a choice. You may not have had a voice. But now that you've, and I get if there's resentment towards the alienating parent, then I can see that this is a temporary situation, how I'm feeling about them. And then I'm just working towards sort of ambivalence, because that's what works for me personally. But trust the process of talk therapy, maybe medication. Those two in concert sound like a really great way to get through this. As I liken psychotherapy to, if you're a tennis player and you want to be the best tennis player you can be, and if people like the pros, if they've still got tennis coaches and they're great players, or who am I as a person on their mental health journey? Who do I think I am, and how do I possibly think that I can be the best that I can be and progress as far as I can on my journey without help? We understand that we're adults and we have licenses to drive cars, we hold down jobs, we have mortgages, we're independent breeding units. And we think, it's in my experience and talking to people, anecdotal evidence, talking to my friends and people I know, we think that we can work all this stuff out ourselves. You might be able to, but the amount of time it takes you to be the best version of yourself, or the most helpful, or the healthiest version of yourself, or the most calm and peaceful, that's what it is for me, version of yourself, trust the process to get help, and have the understanding that there are people out there whose job it is to help people like you. They do it every day, well trained, and you might not have a great rapport with and I know people like, yeah, I tried that once, spoke to one person, but we didn't really it didn't really work for me. Keep trying. Try a different, if it was a male that you were a psychotherapist or psychologist that you experienced with, or a female psychologist or psychotherapist, switch genders. Go for a male, go for a female. Just change it up a bit. Be open to the concept, and because there is hope. There's always hope. Okay, you mightn't be. I am forever, I guess, scarred from my experiences, but I'm not letting that be my primary focus. I'm working with that to try and find out as much about myself as I can, and to help as many people as I can, which I guess is part of this process too. So there is hope.
Absolutely.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
That's a good note to end on, do you think, Dawn?
Yes, I do. Thank you, James, for joining us and for sharing all of that. That was well said. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you to everyone who's watching, and if you've had anything come through for you or come up for you during this talk, please speak to somebody, get some help, have a voice. Part of not having a voice is part of the parental alienation stuff. Know that, and it's important. And for anyone else who wants to come through and speak to us, we'd be open to talking to you as well. And in the meantime, we'll go now and just check in with James after this process and make sure that he's feeling safe and okay. And the message of hope. Yeah, today's Parental Alienation Awareness Day across the world. So, and the Guardians and Gatekeepers Conference is on today. So Dawn and I are speaking to that, and have a look out for our other interviews with adult survivors as well who are coming forward. It's time that our voices are heard on behalf of all the young children still stuck in PA and all the fighting that's still going out there. So thank you to everyone for listening, and we'll upload this and hopefully help out there. So thank you, Dawn, for talking to me. Thank you, James, for talking to me and sharing.
You're welcome.
And, yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Hold on.